Hey everybody, it's Mr. Wagstaff. Cool stuff to talk about today. So today we're going to specifically be talking about Article 2 of the Constitution, which is the executive branch, which pretty much means 99% of what we're going to talk about today is the president and the job the president has, what he's expected to do, and all the different hats that he has, that he wears, he or she wears. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so the national government, part 2, because it's Article 2, is the executive branch, which is the president. Now, before we get started here and start talking about the president, and we're going to talk a lot about the president. The president is probably the most famous person possibly on earth. Everybody knows who the American president is. Because of that, it does a little bit of disservice to this course, and I want to go ahead and clarify this now. The president is not some almighty being in the United States government. The president has about 10, you can make an argument, 10 to 20% of the power of the federal government, all right? Not a bunch, all right? He can easily get overridden by all the other branches, all right? He really has to work with other branches of the legislative branch, judicial branch, all these other things to get things working. Now, to clarify, the president has more power than any other individual person in the government, but he is not stronger than any branch of the government, or he can't just like impose his will, without consequence, or even being able to impose his will at all. If the other groups, the House of Representatives, the Senate decide not to. So the reason I need to clarify that is because as much as the president is talked about in the news, in the media, and how famous he is around the world, there becomes this perception that he is like, you just show up at McDonald's if that's where you work at and fire you. Like, you're fired. He can't do that. He is just the head of the executive branch, which enforces the laws. So here's why the president appears and seems like he is more powerful than he really is. It has to do a lot with the news. Now, I'm not going to vilify the news. We'll talk about the press and stuff later here. But the news, the national media, all right, so a news program that airs in all 50 states, if they want to talk about politics, as we talked about the House of Representatives, the representatives, they represent a very small group of people in different areas. Senators only represent a state. The only person that represents all of the American people is the president. The president is the only person that everybody in America votes for. So we're a representative democracy, democratic republic, but the only person everybody votes for is the president. All the other people you vote for are much more local. Because of that, the only person everybody has in common is the president. So the news talks about the president all the time when it's a national news organization, because the president is the only person they all have in common, that everybody that watches their show has in common. So they talk about the president all the time. So it seems like the president is this super powerful being. Like, they're talking about him this much, he must be that powerful. He's not. Or she is not. As of recording this, we have never had a female president, but and absolutely, I think that will happen sooner rather than later. You might be watching this video in 50 years and being like, he was wrong, or look how smart he was, or why is this, alien invasion happening? Anywho, all right, so let's go through and talk about what the president actually does do now that we kind of realize that, yes, he's a powerful person, but he's not the end-all be-all. He's not like a dictator. All right. So Article 2 of the Constitution creates the executive branch. There's a handful of things that I want to go through and talk about from Article 2 of the Constitution. One of the first things I want to talk about is presidential secession. Basically, before we start talking about the president, what happens if the dude dies or quits? What do we do then? All right. So if the president dies or quits, or in some other way is unable to do his job, what happens? Well, in 1792, they actually came up with a list of what's going to happen, all right? Who's going to take their place. Oddly enough, in 1886, they just said, nah, we don't need that anymore. And they scrapped it. And they just said, we'll just go with whatever happens when it happens. 1947, Harry Truman, he's like, no, we need to make sure that we have a list. So this law is passed in 1947, it's still in effect today, of what happens if the president goes down. So if the president dies or quits, I don't want to be too morbid about it, then the vice president takes over. One of the big changes was originally in the Constitution, or in 1792, it was basically the president of the Senate, not the majority leader, but the president, the guy who kind of does the day-to-day stuff. That used to be the guy that took over. In 1947, they said it's the Speaker of the House. Because remember, the House is the House of the people because it has a bunch of people that represent small groups of people. They thought it would be better if the next person in line was the Speaker of the House. Then it goes to the Senate, and then it kind of break down through the cabinet positions from that level on. All right. So the next thing the president is required to do, all right, is he is required to give the State of the Union address every year. So this is all over the TV. You'll be watching something like a Tuesday, and all of a sudden, like usually in like January, and then like it's on every channel with the president standing up. So in the Constitution, the president has to basically tell Congress, hey, how's the country going? He's in charge of basically making the final decision. Is America good or bad? The president's, everyone I've ever known says the State of the Union is strong. They always say that because they're like, yeah, our country's trash. Who's in charge of it in people's minds? The president, so it makes him look bad. So the president's never going to say anything but the country's the greatest it's ever been. All right. They could, like Thomas Jefferson actually sent a letter to Congress and was like, hey, here's how the country's going. But really, he's the last one to really do that. From then on, the president will show up to Congress, a joint session of Congress, and give a speech. This is what it looks like. It is packed in there. This is the House of Representatives with 435 people. And the Senate with 100 people, and then all these guests and all that. It's a big spectacle of the president standing up there. And then you have like this, the majority leader, the Senate, the Speaker of the House behind you. You have all these optics that take place. But the president is the one who has to basically tell the country, it's what's written, how the country's doing. So why is the president the one that has that job responsibility? Well, as we talked about just a little bit ago, he's the only person in the country that everybody has the ability to vote for, that is on their ballot. He is the only person that represents every person in the United States. So it makes sense that the guy that represents everybody in America shows up and tells Congress how strong the State of the Union is, how good America is. All right. Next thing that he can do, and we talked about this, we talked about the bill. I'm just a bill, just a lonely old bill. Veto power. The president has the ability to veto stuff by Congress. So, if all of these people agreed on something, and this goes to his desk and he says, nah, veto, he can throw out a law. It's a very powerful ability that the president has. Now, they can override him if he's just like a crazy person or something like that. He or she is a crazy person. But it's like a 2/3 majority, and it's rare that Congress basically bucks the president and aggressively passes something even after he vetoes it. So the president does have the ability to veto law. This is a check and balance on the legislative branch. The president is also the only one in the Constitution that can create a treaty. Now, I got a whole bunch of pictures of presidents, but to try to be fair and try to stay out of, because we'll talk all about politics. We got a whole, we'll talk about politics, political parties. Giving examples, especially when you use modern examples, everybody's like, oh, he's using this politician over this one. Pretty much all of my pictures are going to have both Donald Trump and Barack Obama in them, Barack Obama became president in 2008, and Donald Trump became president in 2016. And, by comparison, they seem to be extremely different people, all right? And usually people that feel real strongly about politics usually either like one and dislike the other because that's how it is. And we'll talk about that when we get to political parties and all that. The reason I want to put them on here is these two guys that are very different, and that's Barack Obama in the bottom left, and then Donald Trump up here above me. He's the one on the left shaking the hand of Vladimir Putin. Anyway, very different people, but they all had the same job. They're a lot more similar in the way they went about their job and what their job responsibilities are than anybody would lead on to believe. So the president in the Constitution is the only one that is allowed to sign a treaty with another country. So you got Ronald Reagan up in the top left corner there. Ronald Reagan is signing stuff with Russia. Then you got Donald Trump there signing stuff with Russia. And then you got Barack Obama down there signing stuff with Russia. Now, we have a lot of treaties with Russia. Whether it's nuclear stuff or businesses, there's a lot of treaties that we deal with Russia. So the president is in charge of the treaties, but after he signs a treaty, he has to come back and the Senate has to approve it. Usually this happens. Rarely it doesn't. Probably the most famous is World War I. The Treaty of Versailles was not approved by the Senate, but that's a whole nother story. So generally speaking, the Senate agrees with the president's treaty because usually the treaties are all designed to better America and increase America's standing with another particular country for the benefit of America, and who would say no to that? Now, executive agreements are kind of weird. It's very vague in Article 2 of the Constitution. So if the president doesn't want to have like a official treaty, he can go over to another country and basically work out like just an agreement, which seems a lot like a treaty, doesn't it? And this is a picture of Barack Obama shaking hands with the leader of China with trade and stuff. So it's not an official treaty, but at the same time, it acts kind of like a little bit of a treaty. And the president can do this as much as he wants without any Senate oversight. It's a very vague terminology here. So it's one of those things that is not an issue until it becomes an issue. Interesting, whenever you see, and I've just learned this here recently, whenever you see a flag posted like in the federal government with another country's flag next to it, all right, the American flag always has to be on the right. Or they're like alternating. So like here, even though Barack Obama is the American, he's got the Chinese flag behind him because whenever the American flag is displayed with another country's flag, the American flag always has to be on the right. All right, so the question here is, why is the State of the Union, what is it? And why is the president the best person to give it? All right, so we had talked about this in detail, so pause me, answer this in complete sentences. And we'll move on. All right, so roles of the president. The president wears many hats. I'm going to go through each one of these right here. All right. The commander-in-chief, the president, he's a lot of things. He is a commander-in-chief. All right. And again, I like to use, for this lesson, you got Donald Trump and you have Barack Obama. Two politicians that, if you know somebody super into politics, they're probably super like one and super dislike the other one. And you would think they're complete and total opposites. And, but if you notice here, and all these things that we're going to talk about, they all pretty much are, they have the same job. They're not as drastically different as people make them out to be. So the commander-in-chief is a civilian over the entire military, the armed forces. This is very, very important. So the president basically commands the military to do stuff. And we have the most powerful military on earth. So the president, when he's elected, then has basically control of the United States military. There are still checks and balances. He can't just be like, nuke everybody. There's still checks and balances that go along with that. But probably a lot less checks and balances than a lot of other areas of his job. So he's commander-in-chief. That's one of the most important ones. Militarily, the military is not allowed to basically do anything or fight anybody unless the president gives the go-ahead. So he's the commander-in-chief. He is also the chief diplomat. So when you deal with other countries, the president is so famous. He is the figurehead of the country. So whenever it's something very specific and very important, the president, if he doesn't go himself or herself, then they will appoint somebody that represents them. You got Barack Obama here, the top right, and then Donald Trump here. That's with North Korea. So when you have real touchy, relationships with a country like North Korea, you have like Donald Trump wanted to go do that one himself because North Korea. That's a whole That's a whole nother course, pretty much. All right. The president is also the chief executive. This is the executive branch. He's in charge of the executive branch. What he says in the executive branch goes. It's only one part of the legislature, or one part of the three branches, but what he says goes. So what he can do, since he's in charge of the executive branch, he is the chief executive. He can sign things called executive orders, which aren't laws. It's basically like rules for how the executive branch has to function. So things that the federal government is involved in, or the executive branch is in charge of, he doesn't have to go get a law. He can just say, here's how we're going to do it now. He can't go fire you from McDonald's, all right? But he can say the armed forces can no longer segregate, which was an executive order that they used to divide up based on race, black and white groups in the military. Executive order, since he's over the military, says executive order, we're not going to do that anymore. All right, we are not going to segregate anymore. So that's the type of thing that an executive order could be. It's not a law, but it's basically the new rule for anything that the executive branch controls. He or she is also the party leader. So Donald Trump is a Republican here, and Barack Obama is a Democrat here. You see that the red is typically the color of Republican, and blue is typically the color of Democrat. While they're the president, there's no higher elected office than the president. So by default, they are the leader of their political parties. So they're expected to do all this campaigning and stuff. Even if they're not running for re-election, they're expected to campaign for other people so if you're a Democrat and you're a president, you're expected to campaign for other Democrats, and the same thing if you're a Republican. So as a party leader, very, very busy. They are also a legislative leader. This is a picture of Donald Trump and Barack Obama sitting down with the top people in Congress trying to get laws passed and put forth. The president, just like, we talked about the bills, I'm just the bill. The president, not only can he veto stuff, he can introduce legislation. All right, so not just the House or Senate, but he himself can introduce legislation. So it is very important that the president works with Congress, because he gets final veto. So everybody wants to make sure everybody's on the same page and nobody goes through all that work to get through a bill and then get vetoed. The president is also the head of state. This is a very symbolic one. This is the fancy one that you see Barack Obama and his wife Michelle Obama here with the Queen of England. And they're dressed super fancy because this is like it's a public forum, heads of state, but that they just hang out, and a lot of symbolism here for the head of state. You see Donald Trump here with the new leader of Japan as they're going out to do symbolic stuff as well. So the head of state, very much a symbol. You smile, you nod, you get the pictures. You represent your country like a mascot, as awful as that sounds. That is another job that the president has. He has to represent America. The president is also the economic leader. All right, he is expected to steer the economy in a certain direction. You see Donald Trump here with the World Economic Forum talking about how we're going to move forward economically as a country, as a global community. You got Barack Obama down here talking about, again, how we're going to deal with money and finances. So the president is really in charge of. He's not really in charge of anything, but he is involved in everything and is a pivotal cog in a whole bunch of different wheels. So this brings up the idea of presidential mandates. Presidents desperately want to have a huge mandate. All right. Now, a mandate is not where you and your bro go see a matinee movie together. Like mandate, that's not what a mandate is. A mandate is where you have overwhelming support by the American people and the Electoral College, but really the people, the popular vote. So here's a list of the largest mandates ever had. So basically, the bigger line, basically from the top down, is the largest mandates that presidents have ever had. The bigger the mandate you have, the more you can do unopposed because everybody basically likes you. Probably, let's see what we got here. Probably the most famous in, I would say, our lifetime. I was one when this happened. The one 1984, that's like the fifth one down. The sixth one down, that's Ronald Reagan in 1984, won in a landslide. People were very happy with Ronald Reagan and allowed him to basically do whatever he wanted. If you barely win, like look at the very bottom down here, and notice second from the bottom, Abraham Lincoln barely won. You would think today Abraham Lincoln is considered like one of the greatest presidents we've ever had, if not the greatest. He's there with George Washington, your opinion. But Abraham Lincoln, the second smallest mandate. But like John Quincy Adams barely won. When you barely win, you don't have a lot of support by the American people. You barely won. So you really don't have a lot of clout to throw around. So it is really important for presidents to have a mandate because they can do a lot more stuff and deal in that gray area of what they can or can't do without a lot of pushback. So the question is, why do presidents really want a mandate? Like presidents desperately want a mandate. How does that help them do their job? All right. So we just got done talking about that. So pause me, answer these in complete sentences, and we're moving on. All right. Let's talk about some other powers that the president has that only the president has. All right. One of the most famous ones that the president has, and like people realize the president is like, what? That seems crazy. Is the ability to pardon. All right. So if you pardon somebody, and it means they're guilty of a federal crime, as the president, you'd be like, nah, you're good. Like, not only are you not in trouble anymore if you're in jail, you get out, but it never happened. Just poof, gone. The president is the only one that can do that. So they have this list here of pardons. You know, FDR did 2,819. I mean, they should go down. I'm not going to read them to you. When this came out, it says Donald Trump has granted 19 pardons by comparison to this. All right, and a lot of times it really depends on what is taking place in society. So let me give you an example because we're using Donald Trump and Barack Obama here. So Barack Obama, all right, this is commutations 1,170. I mean, look, there's nobody else even close. Nobody else even close. So here's the difference between this and a pardon, even though they're kind of similar. If the president commutes your sentence, you're in prison, you're in there for a crime, and then the president says your sentence has been commuted, it basically means get out of it, your sentence is over. That's still on your record, right? You can't go like sue them for being in jail, but basically your time is over and you can get out. Now, you're like, so this president, 1,176 criminals, that's crazy. The vast majority of this, like over 90%, are typically, like in the 1980s, there's this war on drugs, and people that got busted with marijuana, just a little bit of marijuana, like 3 times in like the 1980s, would go to prison for life. For life, for like small amounts of marijuana. During Barack Obama's time, he's like, look, if these people have been in prison for 30 years for having just a small amount, you know, they're not criminals, they're not selling it, they're not, like, he said, that's ridiculous. And that's what the vast majority of his commuted sentences were like, we've kept people when you're in prison for 30 years because of marijuana, when the mindset against, towards marijuana has changed in society. So that's the vast majority of those were people were for small scale drug convictions that had been in jail for like 30 years. And he's like, that's ridiculous. That's what most of those were. This is, Trump has more early pardons than recent predecessors. Not surprisingly, pardoning somebody can be controversial because you're like, well, why are you letting them off? So typically, presidents don't pardon anybody until it's like their last day in office and they have this huge stack of people to pardon. They're like, all right, here's all the people I want to pardon. Whereas if you do it early on in your career, people, it's hard to explain every single situation to everybody, even though it's out there. People like to read headlines instead of articles. Here, when these are being presented, they're trying to compare the amount of pardons each side did, but it is hard to find clear-cut, even graphs that aren't biased. They're trying to sway like, oh, this is good or this is bad or whatever. So I'm trying to show you that there's not a lot of differences in the way presidents conduct their job. They might have different personalities, different supporters, but the way they conduct their job, for the most part, is pretty consistent. There are absolutely differences in all presidents, absolutely. But most of it is similar. Most of it is. The president can also veto a bill. We talked about that. That's just a crazy power. I mean, that's a very, very powerful power that the president has. And this is bill veto. The president can also sign executive orders, which we talked about, which is like a rule for the executive branch. And I'll tell you what, you may not have an opinion on Donald Trump one way or other. Doesn't matter. The dude's got an awesome signature. I've always thought that was really cool. But this is Donald Trump and Barack Obama both signing executive orders because they both did it. When Congress won't work with you on something, it's something that you have control of. It was not uncommon for both of these men to just go through and use an executive order on it. So the question is, how is an executive order like a law, but also not like a law at the same time? Well, it's not a law because it's not actually a law, but it is a rule. So anything the executive branch controls, which is very clearly defined things that we've talked about inside the Article 2 of the Constitution, the president doesn't have to have Congress, like another branch, approve this. He can just say whatever he wants inside that branch. He can't say, I don't know, he can't, like, an executive order to fire you from McDonald's. He doesn't have that authority because it's outside his scope. But anything involving the executive branch of enforcing laws, the president can absolutely sign an executive order, which is just like a rule without having to go through Congress. A law would apply to everybody in all aspects, and you'd have to go through Congress for that. All right, that's as far as we're going to get today. See you guys tomorrow.